Welcome to Leaders and Learners. My name is Tanya McKenzie, and you can find me at the intersection of public relations and leadership. Join us as we talk to organizational leaders, elected officials, experts, authors, artists, and personalities, sharing their stories, talking about how they got to where they are and how they continue to learn and lead the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Greetings, good people. Welcome to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. Lifetime learners, people that are always expanding their mind, always looking for solutions. And we just had a fun little issue a minute ago, and we had to learn something new, right? We always have to be open to one, not always being right. I know this and I know that, and being open to listening to others. That's how you find solutions. Listening to others, going through the journey with them, recognizing where you could benefit, and learning something new. So welcome for another little session where we talk to an amazing author today and someone that happens to know a lot about Gen X. And we will leave it at that. So without further ado, we're going to bring on my new bud, Robert. Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Happy to be here.
You know, I'm super thrilled to have you. I want to get this party started by you letting the people know something I know for a fact that they stay confused on. What is a Gen Xer, a Gen Z, generation, this, that, and the, there's so many titles out there. There's so many different ways to try to explain our behaviors and our proclivity to being able to be successful in life or be lazy or look for shortcuts or be tech unsavvy, right? There's so many different ways that describe a generation of people now. So if you could do me the honor, explain what is a Gen Xer?
Absolutely. Let me step back for a second and let's first maybe define and set some parameters about really what defines a generation to begin with. So when we talk about generations, we usually talk about what I would consider the four current generations kind of in the workforce, and that's baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and our newest generation entering the workforce at its early stage is Gen Z. So what defines them all? Well, what usually defines a generation are a multitude of things. First is technology. You've already alluded to that. Some generations have become what we call digital natives. They were born into technology, where baby boomers and Gen X, they're that bridge. They didn't have all of the technology at one point, and then they kind of emerged into the technological landscape that has been evolving. Politics absolutely shapes how we view the world around us. Education, pop culture. These are some of the big lenses that each generation is kind of viewed within. So I would say my book, Gen-eXceptional, which is some of what we're going to talk about today, it came about with me kind of looking at the work environment and how the different generations interact with inside the work context. And what I was seeing is that we definitely, and myself as a Gen Xer, we definitely view things. We have a completely different lens than those ahead of us and those that came before us. And it's interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. What I started to see is that Gen Xers are actually a unique bridge between the two, specifically baby boomers and millennials. And why is that important? Well, one of my areas and one of my focus areas is leadership. I'm constantly, and one of my passions is growing leaders and future leaders. And so I believed, I kind of hypothesized that there's this one cohort, Gen Xers, that really aren't stepping forward into leadership roles. And that question started to kind of put me down a rabbit hole of, well, why is that the case? And is there a benefit to the way Gen Xers view life, view politics, view pop culture, how they were reared? Does that contribute in any positive or negative way to how they will potentially step into a leadership role? And the research was pretty extraordinary. And so what I started to do is try to craft kind of, what my book would look like and what really this topic would look like to be able to present, obviously, to other leaders so they could they could start to kind of recognize the talent that's in front of them and then kind of leverage those people and make sure that they're leading those people correctly.
So baby boomers are like my mom and grandparents.
I'll give you a time frame. Baby
Go
boomers
ahead.
are pretty much 1945, a little bit after World War II. So you can go a little bit. And just remember, anytime we defined an age cohort as far as a generation, we give 2 or 3 years. It's not like on January 1st, 1945, everybody became a baby boomer. What happens is all the things I kind of talked about kind of shape it. So there's a little bit of overlap. And you'll even hear people from time to time, like, I'm a Gen Xer, but I'm a young Gen Xer because of where I'm on the cusp, right? So I kind of identify a little bit sometimes. And I think that that's sometimes why I have such I have empathy and compassion for millennials. And I don't like to hear them get beat up too much because I kind of identify in some regards, some of the of how they were raised, the things and the decision-making processes that they take on. But then I also identify with a lot of your older Gen Xers, and that's 1965 to 1979. So we have baby boomers, 1945 to about 1965. Gen Xers, 1965 to around about 1979. Millennials take us up. There's, depending on the research and who's talking about them, you can take them up from 1980 to about 1996, but also into the new millennium. So into 2000, 2001 and 2. And then our newest defined is Gen Z. Now, something to consider here is that at one time, generations had a large span. So it was about 15 to 20 years would define a generation. That has considerably shrunk. So right now, a lot of the researchers and people in this space, it's hard for them to kind of even name them because generations are happening 1 to 2 years because of the rate of change, right? So we don't even have names for those post Gen Zers that are kind of like being born now, or maybe children and young teenagers. We don't have names for them. There's things that are being thrown out: Generation Y, Generation NXT next, but we don't have a classification because they're happening at such in such a shorter span.
Oh, okay. So you said something earlier. You said, not baby boomers, Gen Z, us. We're Gen Z, right? You're a young Gen Z.
I would be a young Gen X, actually. I would
A
be
Gen X. What's Gen Z again?
Gen Z would be anywhere from, in the books, it's anywhere from like 2000 and
yes. Okay.
5
So
onward.
it's baby boomers, then Gen X.
Correct.
And you're saying that Gen X is not stepping up in leadership like they should.
I believe so. I don't think that they're represented as they should be. And if you look at politics and even the landscape of politics right now from a national level in the United States, who are those that are running for the presidency, right? Who are our primary candidates right now? And they happen to represent the older baby boomers. And then even if you look at those that are entering in politics, I just use politics as an example because I think everybody's more aware of that. We don't have those within, those younger Gen Xers. I would say anyone, between 70 and 79, really kind of stepping forward and kind of taking the mantle. Because what we do know is that eventually, even though baby boomers have held on a little bit because of COVID and they're still represented in the workforce, they are aging out, at a fast rate. So logically, what would be the next group to step up? And that would really be Gen Xers. Or if they get leaped over, millennials step into these management and C-level positions. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't do a great job, but I don't think that they have the experience enough to step into some of those roles.
I'm hosting a talk with someone that's saying we ain't doing our job. I can appreciate that because if we're not doing our job in stepping up, we need to talk about what that looks like and how do we move the needle forward. But before I even go there, okay, we talked a lot about technology. I know something about your book where you talked about latchkey kids, and maybe that culture has something to do with where we are in regards to leadership. But I also want to address, before we get on us, these young people, these millennials and Gen Zers, they, for those that are in leadership, have oftentimes called millennials and Gen Zers lazy. So I want to talk about attributes and behaviors, and I would even say stereotypes, because I'm guessing that you have to deal with that too in what you do in consulting in your work. So can we talk about behaviors, habits, and stereotypes?
That's a great, you are spot on. And I run into that so much, where generations are labeled. Each generation comes with a set of stereotypes, and we perpetuate those because we just kind of believe that, we paint a broad stroke with everyone in that generational cohort. And you said it perfectly. A lot of what I've heard in my own experience, I often hear baby boomers and some Gen Xers refer to millennials as lazy, and that is the furthest from the truth. And again, this is me defending another generational cohort, because the research and what we see really doesn't support that. And I'll give you a quick example. Millennials, they have a different lens of the world because of technology and how they've been reared so far. So what gets misunderstood is how they kind of look at the work environment and how they analyze and synthesize things to get the work and the job done. And a quick example of this is a millennial and possibly a Gen Zer. Again, they're still babies. They're still entering the workforce at a very, they're the ones that are, anywhere between, 13 and 18 years of age at the current time. So they don't have a lot of experience. But I'll look at millennials real quick, and they may look at a task, right? And they say to themselves, well, wait a second, why can't this task be done remotely? Why do I need to be in the office to do this specific set of tasks to get this job done? Why can't I use an app to answer the question? Why do I need to spend 40 hours in the office when this job really only requires 20 hours of labor to complete? What they're doing is they're asking questions, and they're using, some of them, most of them, digital natives. They're using technology. They're using the world around them. They're using their education to answer questions just from a completely different lens. And that's being viewed as lazy. So if we go back and we look at how baby boomers and older Gen Xers look at work, it's all about, well, I got to be at the office, right? I got to be at the office, and you got to be there, and you got to be chained to the desk, and your work is predicated on how many hours you put in, and company loyalty, and they're not looking at the end product. So it's just, I think sometimes millennials and Zs are asking additional questions based upon how they're viewing the world. And then baby boomers and Xers, some Xers, are looking at it and saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. So why would you want to change it? And you must be lazy because you don't want to be here, and you want to use this application that I really don't know too much about to solve the problem. You see what I'm saying?
I do, but okay, I'm following you, and
Yeah.
I feel that. I actually appreciate the thinking outside the box, the make it make sense mindset. But it's the make it make sense piece of it that confuses me, because you either don't appreciate the work, or you want to work at your convenience, and then you still want to get paid the same amount as someone that has been doing it for 20 plus years. That's where I'm like, okay, there's no level of oh God, I won't say gratitude, but progression. There's no progression. It's like I'm walking in the door, kicking in the door, and I want everything in the door as soon as I get there. Like, hold on, whoa, Tonto, like, come, whoa,
Well, it's a great point, but let's dissect that real quick.
yes.
So I hear this a lot, like, wait your turn, hold on a second, wait a second. There's people in front of you. And I think that there's a couple layers to that. The first one is if we're promoting people or moving people up the chain or down the chain, whatever you want to call it, but you're giving opportunities to people because of longevity, I think that might be a mistake versus output versus quality of work, right? So I think sometimes we have to evaluate that piece of it. That was an old leadership philosophy. Mark has been here for 15 years. The management position is open up. Kim has been here for 5 years. Well, it goes to Mark. Versus, is Kim a better employee? Is Kim's outcomes and outputs and KPIs and hitting her goals and her metrics more important to the company than Mark? Or are we just going to give it to Mark because he's been here for 15 years and he's just a good soldier? That's one layer, right? So just making sure we're being fair to the job that we're asking that needs to be performed. The other piece of it, I think, to some degree, is how our millennials and how our Gen Zers are being reared, right? And also what's kind of happening in the home and happening in different environments on the sports fields and in the schools. It is a high recognition, right? High recognition, and also I refer to it, and it's been in the last 2 decades, we use this terminology a lot, is this helicopter approach to our children and making sure that they, everything is kind of taken care for them. So there isn't always a lot of opportunity for them to fail and then to grow and then to go through stages and processes, because sometimes I've done this myself. As a parent, I try to remove many of those obstacles because that's just basically how we pretty much have been parenting for a period of time here. So what is that expectation? If they get into the work environment and they want to just full throttle because they believe that they can get this job done, they can use the technology. I don't know why we do it this way. They're questioning things. They want that promotion. We may have contributed to that as parents and parents of older millennials. We may have contributed to that whole thought process. Something to consider.
Listen, okay. All right. So I'm digesting what you're saying. I'm going to try not to be so shady about young people wanting to come in making 6 figures with no experience, straight out of college. But I do want to lean into what you were saying, though, about our lack of leadership and leadership initiative. I struggle with this myself because I find myself in so many leadership roles. I mean, why not? We have the experience. We are a generation of people that actually did listen to the people before us. So we have a wealth of knowledge, and we were able to watch the internet and all of this technology advancement happen. So we've been on the roller coaster. We get it. We understand progression. So I find myself taking on these roles all the time, leadership on these boards in the city, blah, blah, blah. And most of the time I'm irritated and frustrated, like, where is everybody else at? Because you're really good at complaining. You're really good at voicing your concerns. But when it's time to take on these leadership roles, you actually shrink and hide behind the couch. And that is hard for me because we need help. So those that are in these leadership roles, if we had help, maybe it would be easier. Maybe the progress would happen. Even in politics, you do have some Gen Xers out there really trying to do the thing, not being silly or making an ass out of our political system. But it gets frustrating and tiring because they're carrying so much weight. So what is your advice for the Gen X leaders now that are looking for more Gen Xers to help lead the nation, the young people, the movements that need to happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that question, but again, you're spot on. Why aren't we seeing more Gen Xers? And I want to be very specific because Gen Xers are in that 20-year window, just like the baby boomers. And so I want to speak to really the more younger Gen Xers, those between 1970 or maybe even 1975 and 1980, 79 there. Which would put them anywhere in their 40s to maybe early 50s, give or take, and which what I call the sweet spot of really, even though I'm not trying to use ageism or age as a goalpost, but that is usually the sweet spot of someone's career, right? You're going from mid-career to maybe the C-suite. You're taking on more, as you said, leadership roles, leadership activities, whether they be in the nonprofit sector or you're joining boards, or you're getting involved in politics. you're starting to, usually that is the sweet spot. But because the nature of a Gen Xer, so let's talk about that real quick, because I think that that's important to your question. Gen Xers, what has defined them? Well, they are the latchkey. They were the kids who their parents probably, that was the start of being socially acceptable. Divorce was becoming more of a socially acceptable thing. Single parent homes. If you were in more of what they would have at the time referred to as a traditional home, both parents were starting to have to work, so dual incomes were important. So that child or that teenager, there was some times after school or during the weekends where they were kind of on their own. They were kind of figuring whatever they had to figure out. They were figuring it out in real time. And then also politics, and Gen Xers experienced the Vietnam War. They also experienced the onset of the Cold War, right? So globally, that impacted how they look. Watergate, right? Early issues in the 1980s related to certain political, upheavals. So there was things that shaped their mindset, and they became very critical, right? And they became very critical of power. They became critical of politicians. So I think sometimes it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, they're not in the game, which is, I do believe that they're not getting in the game. They're sitting on the sideline. They're watching other people, including yourself, do the work. Why aren't they jumping in? Well, these are some of the reasons they're not jumping in. I believe that some of those reasons also make them better leaders, like being a latchkey kid and figuring things out and trying, having to get home from school, do your homework, no eyes watching you. You had to be responsible maybe for siblings. You had to put maybe a meal on the table. Maybe you had a part-time job. So you were doing all these things, but you weren't doing them under the microscope. You were doing them because you had to do them. You had to figure them out. And then also, I think that contributes to being a successful leader. So that shapes you. But some of those negative things, like being critical, maybe sometimes being judgmental, those things often might prevent certain people from getting in some of these areas or these arenas and participating.
So how do we fix that?
Well, you read the book, and
I love it.
That was coming. I don't know. I always suppose. Well, here's the thing. I don't know that there's a magic bullet. There never really is a magic bullet to anything we do. I think what we first have to do, just like any type of problem, is diagnose the problem we have, and having these open conversations with leaders like yourself on these type of forums, bringing people on and saying, okay, listen, here's what we need out of the next generation of leaders to prepare also our millennials. So I go back to something you said before. How can we have the expectation that our future generations are going to have all of these skill sets? Like you said, they come in, they want the money, they want the office, they want all of these things, but then we also aren't willing to maybe hold them up, but also train them, mentor them, guide them. Instead, to your point, we're kind of like saying, this is one of the reasons why I wrote this book, is I saw firsthand baby boomers and millennials at each other's throats, right? And you can even hear it. I mean, if you millennials in the last 5 years, the boomers, right? The boomer, they'll negatively call someone in that age group a boomer, even if they're not a boomer and they're a Gen Xer.
Disrespectful. Yeah,
right. As a total slight and disrespect, right? And then you said it earlier, the boomers are saying they're lazy. They don't know, they want it all. They want it fed. And I think in the middle, which is I call our group the bridge, can have really good conversations because we actually believe in merit on both sides. I will defend both sides because I can see the value that that baby boomers have, and trying to, for me, I tried in my career, grab all of that knowledge from them as they were exiting the work environment. Millennials, these digital natives, they understand, millennials, one thing that is extremely important to them, it's not if the company, how well the company is doing, it's if the company is doing good, right? Externally, that they're involved in the environmental causes, social causes. That's how they're making employment decisions. So I admire that. I say, you know what? You're not just looking at money and all of these extrinsic motivators. You are looking intrinsically, and I think that that's something that's important. So being a Gen Xer, and I'll end on this, having the ability to recognize both, being a bridge while they're both still, one's in the infancy of their careers and one is on the exit, being this bridge and this kind of sounding board for both is important.
Do you have a piece of your book that you can read to us and let the viewers get a little taste of what they are going to be getting? Because I have a feeling there are some people out here that happen to pay attention to this little podcast that might want to tap into that book and find some solutions as leaders, as business owners, as organizational leaders and experts and consumers. Do you talk about consumerism a little bit at all? Because that's another issue for people like us that are in leadership and like PR and marketing is consumer behavior.
No, not necessarily in the book. In my
Okay.
research, obviously, this is, again, spot on here. It looks like you've done your homework too. This is a big area of focus for a lot of people because obviously with AI, big data, things we're using to leverage, like you said, to leverage data to really speak to consumerism. We do have to recognize that the purchasing power among the different generations is something we need to kind of focus in on. I don't address it specifically in the book, but it is an overarching topic that I think needs a little bit more. And I don't, in this book, it's a quick hit. It's less than 150 pages. I'm a micro learner. Like, give me the straight, give me the down and dirty, make it easy because we are very busy. And I love how you opened up the podcast. The idea of being a lifelong learner is obviously, we've been talking about that for decades, but we put so many barriers in front of it, don't we? And we make it so complicated sometimes where people are just like, I don't have the time or the resources or the capacity to do it. So anytime I create anything or I'm in some type of space where I'm trying to get people kind of marshaled in the right direction, I try to give it in a micro setting. So that's really what the book is. And again, just addressing, Gen Xers and the book here, again, Gen-eXceptional. And I do think they are exceptional. I think that it's a cohort. It's a generational group that is really going to transform things, for the next 20 to 30 years. And I think we're positioned very well. But I'll read just a little bit here on page 8. Much debate and discussion has been devoted to the introduction of Gen X, particularly about their leadership style. Gen X, comprised of those born between 1965 and 1975, 1980, is commonly regarded as a bridge between baby boomers and millennials. Gen Xers are identified by their autonomy, skepticism toward authority figures, self-reliance, and preference for hard work over status symbols or connections, which creates a contrast between their leadership techniques and those utilized by baby boomers and millennials. And I think that that's a good point, is that, when we talk about here, and I already kind of spoke to it a little bit, they value autonomy. That's very big for Gen Xers. But they also recognize the importance of collaboration. So, they're the ones, again, in the work environment who are saying, give me the task, give me the job. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to project manage this. But also, I want to hear what you have to say. Where if you look at the other two generations, that might not be the case. A baby boomer might be more inclined to plow through, get it done. This is the way. We've always done it this way. And then the millennials, we do know factually that they really do love real-time feedback, constant feedback. Am I getting this right? And again, going back to how they get to that point, how have they been raised? What does it look like in the classroom? And if we look at today's classroom, especially at the primary and secondary level, it's constant reinforcement, constant feedback. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. But to your earlier point, there has to also be a little bit of balance between both, right? So
they like constant feedback, constant accolades, constant applause. They love all of that.
Yeah.
All of that. Tell me 3 words that you would never want affiliated with you in the work you do.
Yeah. So this is, for me, lazy. I mean, it just kind of, I don't want to be referred to as lazy. Pessimistic, that's just constantly the opposite of what I do. I'm someone who just really just looks at the whole world and everything around me as, an opportunity. And then I think maybe, a third one would be, I don't want to ever be called rude. I try to do things as a Gen Xer, I'm always in that mindset of, just making sure that I'm going to be firm, fair, and friendly. I love to always say that, but I don't want to come off as rude, and I don't want to put anybody off, because I'm constantly trying to get people to adopt and buy in to the things that I'm promoting as a leader.
I like that. I like that. So listen, I could talk about this stuff all day. Really, I'm really trying to just constrain myself from just pelleting off a bunch of questions, because this is information that I think a lot of people struggle with, even when they started to label generations. Like, this is the first time that's ever happened, right? It leaves us with more questions. Questions if you care, like if you want to solve problems, if you want to galvanize leadership, if you want to help the next generation be better. I just want some of us to tap in and do more. So I definitely will be getting the book. For anybody else that's interested, let them know where they can get the book, how they can be in touch with you, and how to follow your journey and all the good stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, thank you for having me on. I agree with you. These are topics that I'm very passionate about, leadership studies and education in general. I'm a lifelong learner, but I'm an educator at heart. I've been in education now for 18 plus years, all the way up through middle school, teaching in middle school to higher education. And that's where I am now. So, I'm very passionate, and I too probably could talk all day about these things and these interests that I have, especially in the topic of how we get people marshaled in the right way, moving in the right way. And we're not pushing them, but we're kind of guiding them to reach their potentials in the work environment. How you can get a hold of me, DrDeFinis.com. That's my website. All the information about me, what I offer, my books and the different projects that I'm involved with are on my website. Again, DrDeFinis.com. I'm on Twitter too. I try to keep as active as I possibly can on the social media handles, and that's @DeFinis. My book is available on Amazon. It's in several different formats. It's also available on iUniverse. And again, it's Gen-eXceptional.
I love it. I'm going to make sure that all of that information is in the captions. I absolutely appreciate you. But let me ask you this before you get out of here. You're in education. A lot of what you're talking about right now is in the workplace. But how do you use this information to deal with your students and their parents? Because parenting seems to be a space too that we need more leaders in parenting. Like, is it just me?
No. I think anybody obviously guiding anyone, right? I mean, if we could define leadership in a technical sense, but even just a overarching broad sense, anybody who's guiding anyone to any type of goal or any type of outcome is leading someone. And it does, for those that have children in the home, you are leading little ones, or even teenagers, or sometimes they stay a little bit longer and they become those adults. You're leading people down a pathway and through a journey. And I would say, for the most part, I think it takes understanding, compassion, empathy, the ability to listen, not constantly put your lens and framework on someone else. And I think we tend to do that. I try to be very mindful as a parent that my children, I have my daughter, she's 8, my son is 15. Believe it or not, even 8 to 15, they might be lumped into the same generation, but they're not. They process the world very differently. And I need to sometimes even step back. So I think, as a teacher in an educational setting, or a parent, or whoever's leading children or young people, I'm now in the secondary space, post-secondary space, but anybody who's in that specific space, don't put your generational lens on top of them, because that's what happens. We start creating these stereotypes and these expectations that aren't real. I think, and I'll end on this, I think the opportunity with this topic at large is to take a step back, look at what all of these wonderful things, whether you're I mean, we can even go one step further. Traditionalists who are maybe they're little older than baby boomers, but they're still in the world. They're still out there being productive. Your boomers, your Xers, your millennials, your Zs, your Gen Nexers, whatever you want to call them, look at all of the fantastic opportunities that they possibly present in any space and figure out how to leverage that to get things done or move the needle a little bit. I know I've been in the situation where I've coached younger people, I've mentored younger people, and I try to constantly know more about what their world looks like. And it just kind of helps me get them to where they need to be.
I appreciate you sharing that. We do have a lot of parents right now that are struggling. Sometimes these Gen Xers are running the household. I digress. Okay. With that being said, I want to thank you. Wish you all the best, and please stay connected. Are you going on tour with the book? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
Yeah, so I mean, this is part of it. I'm on a handful of podcasts. I've done some book signings already. I'll be into the new year. I have a lot of, interestingly enough, this is my goal for this last year is to get this to publication. I actually have another book coming out, more teacher centric, with a colleague of mine. So this is a big year for my publications, getting these messages out. Time, it's like anything else. We're always trying to find the time to do all of these side projects and all of these things that kind of ignite us. So this is a really strong year for me. I really I appreciate opportunities just like this to get the message out there. And again, I'm not always trying to sell something. I'm always, as a leader, I just want to grow people. I want to grow educators. I want to grow fellow leaders. I want Gen Xers to step in. Our political landscape needs us. And you said it, our nonprofits need us, our local governments need us. They need us to step forward, even if it's for a little bit, right? A term here, a term there, you're going to make such an impact as a Gen Xer if you can kind of step out and get into the game.
I love it. Thank you again. And please stay in touch. Your next project, if you come to California and you happen to do an event, let us bring some people out and support you. But I appreciate you. Thank you, and stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for showing up to the podcast where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. When you get a sec, take a moment, leave a comment. What you think about today's episode, and share it with someone that you know could use the gems that were dropped today. Follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss who's coming up next. You never know who could show up here and what they could say. For your professional needs, marketing, PR, communications, and leadership, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Sand and Shores, or hit us up at sandandshores.com. Again, thanks so much for showing up. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.